All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Between Two Coasts podcast. We've got a good episode for you today, some exciting information that we hope you all take from this. So I'm going to go ahead and play our quick little intro video here.
Thanks again, Bob Wilson. Always want to give him the shout out.
That's right. Our little jingle. All right. And share sound. Video. All right, Mark, you seeing it on your side?
There we go.
Perfect. Sound on your side,
Man, we've changed quite a bit from that, from that meme, haven't we?
Yes, we have. All right. Close out of that, and we're back. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I'm Tim Bennock from QLI.
And I am Mark Pugh with Preferred Medical, and together we are
Between Two Coasts.
Okay, a little bit better. You think we practiced that?
We've tried, right? Welcome to episode 4. As the description says, we're trying to replicate virtually what we've done in person for years. Have a catch-up, informal discussion with colleagues that have become friends. The biggest difference is obviously that we're not in a conference hall, but we're on a Zoom call. We want the audience to engage, so please ask questions throughout. We're gonna, throw some questions your way, and we hope you can, engage us with a question or the question and answer in the chat function, and then. Yeah, give us your comments throughout. Mark and I will read them. We've got Wendy and Julie here. They'll also have control of it. So everyone's going to be keeping an eye on that. And today's theme is COVID conferences. So Mark, I'll let you get started.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, this isn't conferences about COVID, but the impact of conferences, just to make sure. So we're really happy to have with us today Julie Featherman, who's the advisory board member of the WCI 360 conference that historically has been held in Orlando every August, and Wendy Gertis, the executive director of the Oklahoma chapter for the Case Management Society of America. Both of them were involved in organizing a conference event in 2020, including the wild scramble from in-person to virtual. Both are actually involved in taking what they learned and applying it to their 2021 events, which for Wendy, I think is in November. And Julie, yours is in December. So you've got a little bit of time to figure that out. The great news for today's audience is that Julie and Wendy represent both ends of the spectrum. So Julie represents an annual national conference with thousands of attendees and hundreds of faculty. And Wendy represents a regional membership association with an annual event of about 100, 120, 150, I think, is about right, along with monthly gatherings. So it's not just a one-time event. What we discovered, Tim and I always have a prep meeting to kind of talk through the content. And what we discovered during that prep is that they have a lot in common, but they also have very unique perspectives because they're in different places and at different scale. So we're going to talk about what happened in 2020, which there were a couple of good things, but from conference organizers, it was a crazy train. And then we're going to talk about what will happen in 2021, because I think those that are on this call are interested. Maybe you're in the process of trying to budget for and figure out what you're going to do in 2021, both in-person, exhibitor, sponsorship, attendees, virtual, where you're going to go, where you're going to spend your money. So hopefully the timing of this is really good as y'all are all trying to figure out where you're going to go with that. But before we go down that path, I'd like to start off with something that the audience may not know about you. So Julie, will let you get started and kind of share something that maybe the audience doesn't know about you.
Okay. Mark and Tim, thank you so much for having me be a guest on this episode today. I'm really excited to be here. Something you might not know about me, everyone has a unique story about how they entered into the work comp industry. And so for me, I graduated from Florida State University, and instead of going back to Alaska, that might be another one where I grew up. So I spent my formative years and growing up in Anchorage, Alaska. I knew I didn't want to move back, so I went to Clearwater to stay with my grandmother and find myself, so to speak. About 30 days into that journey, she handed me the good old fashioned classified ads and said, "It's time for you to get a job." And so in those ads, I found an ad for a Spanish speaking private investigator and for the workers' compensation industry. So I thought, okay, I've had 2 semesters of Spanish and I'm a criminology and English major. I think I can do this. So that is how I got into the industry. I was a private investigator and I didn't actually hold a camera, but I did all of the in-house investigations pre-internet where you had to, write letters to the courthouse. You were doing pretext calls to claimants who were not represented, trying to get information. And so I did that for about 9 months before I went into a different aspect of my career.
So you were not hiding behind trees then, is what you're saying?
I was not that adventurous, no.
Yeah.
No. You're in my office with a phone and a word processor, so to speak.
There you go. I remember those days, yes. Wendy, how about you? What's something that maybe the audience doesn't know about you?
Well, this is probably more geeky, nerdy, but I absolutely love Star Trek and went to my first convention in 1976 in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And I figure we're boldly going to the future in all this podcast and virtual and how to handle conferences and meetings. So,
what character did you dress up as?
Uhura, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Communications. So yeah. I loved her.
Gotcha.
Yeah, have her autograph. It's really nerdy.
Yeah, that it's starting to get a little geeky. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Several of their autographs, but yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. We like to start that off with, it's a good way for the next time you're in person, people will now know something. It's like a conversation starter for the next time. So in both cases of your conferences, you had to go from in-person to virtual very quickly with a focus on both financial viability and audience engagement. The good news is that both of your events were later in 2020, so you saw how other events responded. The bad news is you had to completely rethink how your event would be handled. So what kind of things did you talk about with your co-organizers and about how to move forward in the year for the conference? Julie, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. I mean, if any of you have attended WCI in the past, it is a massive conference. Usually we have about 8,000 people in the Orlando World Marriott Center, all congregating. We're infamous for good or for bad for the lobby bar situation where, that is where a lot of connections are taking place. Meetings are happening. The exhibit hall is thriving. We have 25 tracks, over 200 sessions and 500 speakers. So taking something from that large of a scale and trying to figure out what we're going to do with that was intimidating at first. I remember having lunch with Steve Rissman, who is the program chair and co-founder of the conference. And it was in March, and it was kind of right as COVID was really starting to bubble up, and WCRI had just met in Boston. We were looking to see what RIMS was going to do, and we were just hoping and praying that by August, this won't be something that we have to concern ourselves with. Everything's going to be fine. And then it progressed and we realized it wasn't. So we had to go into contingency planning mode. We were still kind of waiting and seeing. We were really hoping and being positive that we were going to be able to meet in some capacity in August, because that conference is, while the education is second to none, we believe, and there is so much value in that, the networking component. And I think, we'll probably get into that is what we're missing from this virtual experience that we've experienced in 2020. That was just really hard for us to wrap our brain around what we were going to do. So were we going to virtualize this first? Were we going to charge for it? Was it going to be free? Were we going to just show up and be there for our work comp community, which is ultimately what we did? And, we had to talk about how we scale that down. What kind of platform are we going to use? How are we going to be creative? How are we going to implement the sessions? Which speakers do we want to get involved? How can we engage our sponsors and give them a voice? So those are a lot of the things that we had to think about. In addition to Give Kids the World is a big component of our conference. I don't know if many people know, but WCI is a nonprofit entity, but we give back to several other nonprofits, Kids Chance, the Alliance of Women on Workers' Compensation. Give Kids the World is the big one with the service day. So how could we still support them in this pandemic, while we were still trying to, support ourselves as well. So those were some of the things that we had to take a look at.
That's a lot of moving parts. I mean, y'all always have that concert on Monday night, and everybody dresses up for that. And I have been in the lobby bar trying to hear conversation when there's, 15,000 of your closest friends all talking at the same time in this very loud. Is it accurate to say that the Marriott actually makes their budget based on what y'all spend at the bar those 2 days?
I think the Marriott was very sad when we ended up having to postpone until the following year. Yes, the hotel does very well the 5 days that the Workers' Compensation Institute holds their event.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, Julie, your event, WCI, is really revolves around that 1 week. And there's obviously activity that goes in and around that. But Wendy, you're got not only the annual event, but you've also got monthly gatherings, so it was slightly kind of a different. So what were you talking about with your co-board members, co-organizers about what to do with that?
Well, we usually start our first luncheon in April. So in March, it was already getting scary. And so we postponed that, thought we'd move it to May, then move it to June. And then we just had to cancel all of them. And then the group had to get together to decide, we didn't have a Zoom account and how to actually do that and have the speaker, are they willing still? And could we get sponsors for Zoom? So the first one, we didn't worry about it. We just wanted to go ahead and plan this for September and not charge. I mean, we needed to make sure that we were reaching our membership, all the attendees from the conference before that were not members, and how important it was to let them know that, they could get a CE, that we were still here, and how important we felt they were. And then we did September, we kept it to October with actually a discussion on COVID from an infectious disease doctor, very popular here in Oklahoma with Integris. And then of course we had you in November, Mark, speaking on medical marijuana, since that was a big deal here, and sales are amazing here, supposedly. So, and then now we just realized financially, as a nonprofit also, we've got to make decisions on what can we cut back, how can we move forward. But our board wants to keep, the membership get free CEs and to charge for non-members, because it is really difficult for a nonprofit. If you're not having income, you still have expenses. Mm-hmm. So we actually have a board meeting next week to discuss all that, because it is important, and all the board has to realize, what goes on to make an association function. So, and conference in November sounds far away, but, will exhibitors and come back, sponsors, will attendees. The one thing that this has shown us, that we're reaching the rural areas of Oklahoma so that they can get on and see what we have to offer. So that helped a lot of them, different areas that we've never reached before.
Yeah, so that was going to be,
hopefully they see a value.
Yeah, that was going to be my question to you guys. Is so, did you see a shift, or you said you have 8,000 people that are in the Marriott bar, or at the bar itself. Yeah. That's the only spot they're at. Did those numbers dip, drastically when you went virtual? Like, what are the numbers you guys are seeing on the virtual side compared to in person? And is that something that, because of what the spike either you saw or the decline you saw one way or the other, are you looking at hybrid models, or what are some things that have come of that going forward?
Sure. Interestingly enough, when we do have that many attendees come, not all of them are coming as a registered attendee. Some of them are coming just for the networking aspect. So what I thought was unique, and while we're a national conference, we're still trying to. We've done a great job in the past 7 to 10 years of really building a national exposure and attendance. But there are still some people in other, the West Coast who have not experienced WCI yet. So when we made the decision to go virtual, we were really hoping that while we weren't going to be able to meet in person, we might be able to introduce ourselves to people in the industry who either wouldn't or couldn't come to Florida in August for this event. And so I feel like we were really successful in that. We had about 2,000 people register for the 3-day event that we did back in August. And from numbers, if I remember correctly, we had anywhere from 800 to 650 attend each session. So if you've been to WCI before, there's so many sessions and different tracks going on at any time. And I think they do a really good job of providing educational content, no matter, what kind of stakeholder or where you are at in your career in the industry. But this really gave you the opportunity to dial into just a few particular sessions. So for instance, the live surgery, hands down, one of our most popular. We re-aired our WCI virtual broadcast yesterday, and it was still, the highest attended session. Orlando Orthopedic does an incredible job. You're watching a live surgery happen, whether you're in the ballroom at the Orlando Marriott or here. And we had 800 people attend that session from all over the country. So getting educational credits too. So while we did see a dip in, obviously 2,000 is not 8,000, but we had more people dialed into the actual educational content, and we were able to reach new people, which, hopefully that will translate into them considering coming to the conference in December.
For sure.
Well,
Wendy,
I'm sorry. I think our Zoom webinars actually brought in just as many as if they had the personal lunch. So.
Gotcha. Well, Wendy, we've got a colleague of yours from the United Kingdom, Claire Parrish, the Case Management Society of the UK. So, and Chris Garland of the Arizona Self-Insureds, as well as Susan Scatchell with some couple large events. And it seems like I probably have similar responses. It's interesting, Tom Glasson made the question, the opinion on those conferences that got extended over a long period of time with a couple of days a week programming, taking several weeks to complete the conference. So, there have been some like IAIABC, instead of having the convention over a 3-day period, they did it over an entire month. I think it was either 4 or 5 weeks, and they did a couple of days a week. And it was interesting because, it gave you the opportunity to participate in different things, but it was extended over a period of time. Have y'all thought about or had experience with conferences that have kind of gone from that compressed schedule into more of a, just give us 2 hours, every Wednesday for the next 7 Wednesdays or something?
We haven't done anything like that so far. They're hoping that our November one might just be a day, not a day and a half, and take the half part and put that all as a webinar on ethics. They have discussed doing that because everyone here needs ethics. But the hotel Embassy Suites is acting, that they want us. It's still, the bottom line is your exhibitors and trying to get sponsors, and we've had trouble sponsor wise with webinars, and even though you try to do videos for them and advertising, they're missing that in-person networking, and that's their value. So how do we engage that? What do we have to do? Can we mail them something? Can we have door prizes? Can we bring something to the people that attend? We have to figure out some options on that.
Yeah,
So.
Tom made a good point there too. He talked about CE, right? So CE is a critical component to conferences in person.
Yes.
And I have seen, we talked about this in our pre-session a little bit earlier this morning of like, I do feel like there are a lot of virtual conferences that aren't offering CEs, which I think is impacting people attending them, right? And so with these extended conferences, if they're not offering it for every session, are people only going to pick and choose the one that have CEs to attend? That's something as a planner I would not want to have to think about. It's just, there's a lot of cost involved and a lot of time on the back end getting everything certified. So
I think if you're not going to offer CEs, you're going to have to be extremely creative in what kind of value and benefit you are offering to compete for the attendees' time. I mean, we're really being inundated with virtual education right now. So, people are going to these conferences to get that CE education. And so if you're not going to offer that online, you need to have a tremendous topic. You need to have speakers that no one else is getting their hands on. You need to have a networking viable networking, which I think is probably the biggest thing we're all missing. And Wendy, you were saying earlier that sponsors and exhibitors are really the backbone of our conferences. They really can make or break us, and their participation is necessary. So what can we do? How can we give them opportunities virtually? But really, how can we get them back into the space in person when it's safe to do so? And I think we're both kind of on the same page that we're moving ahead with an in-person conference. Going back to your question, Mark, WCI, we did our virtual conference in August, and we did it over the dates we would normally do it. We did a 3-day period and just a snapshot each day of different sessions. But then we decided to re-air those sessions for people who might have missed it or needed additional CE credits. And so we did that. We did the ethics class, which is here specific to Florida claims handlers, in October. Then we re-aired the second day in November, and then we just recapped the last day yesterday. So giving people an opportunity to have those CE credits and incorporating sponsorship opportunities within that virtual experience, where we allowed sponsors to come on and either sponsor their own session where they got to present. We accredited their session for them. They had a panel or talked about their company or an important topic in the service they provide. And then we had sponsors come in and they had 15 minutes to present a video, do a live Q&A, do something fun, whatever they wanted to do, 15 minutes for all of our attendees live. So that was one way we tried to give them some exposure and a way to connect, but still it's really, really tough in this virtual world. And I just think it's nothing like being in person.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Francis in Tennessee posted a comment about their conference, and we were a sponsor there, and they had this interesting virtual exhibit hall, and you created your own page. And it allowed you to do graphics. It allowed you to embed videos. There was an online chat. I can't remember what it was, but, it had the ability to do that. You could even click to Zoom, with somebody on the sales. And, it was an interesting approach. I've also heard of another conference that wasn't work comp. It actually had a ticker across the bottom of the screen. If people were looking at the screen, they figured if they did a ticker across the bottom with the sponsors, and I think the way it worked out is the more you paid for a sponsor, the longer your name kind of sat there at the bottom of the ticker, but there's a lot of creativity, I think, trying to give sponsors value, because Wendy, to your point, without sponsors, attendees can pay their way, but attendees generally don't pay for all the keeping the lights on and all that kind of stuff. So you got to have sponsors, and I think we've gotten some really good input on the note section in regards to sponsors. What in your perfect world, right now you're both planning to do in person. God forbid that doesn't happen. What did you learn from 2020 that if you have to go virtual again, what would you do differently? What lessons did you learn, especially maybe in and around that sponsorship engagement?
I saw a gentleman posted that they sent out care packages, and that is really a cool idea. I mean, it might cost printing and all that, but if you had, information, I'm not sure what was in them. I mean, I thought it'd be great to send a face mask out, with our logo and a sponsorship, and, that because we're in healthcare, it is really, safety is the number one. Mm-hmm. So, the hand sanitizer, we must hand that out at every single conference. I mean, it's been for years with that. And everybody seems to use it on their desk. So that's always been a big one for exhibitors and sponsors to do. But that care package is kind of cool. If you did a conference virtual, that everybody who did sponsor, you sent them something from them. something in the mail and a package is always more exciting than getting an email. I mean, emails you delete, you're going to open that package.
For sure.
And there are different options, of what to put in it. And we, again, have to be extremely creative and engaging. So that was kind of a neat idea.
So what kind of platforms do y'all like? I know, Wendy, you primarily focused on Zoom. Julie
Yes.
went full into a kind of a turnkey type of a solution because of all the different things. Zoom is fairly easy, I guess, to decide on. I mean, you can get the free version or whatever, but, making a decision about kind of the platform that WCI was doing, y'all had to look through probably a variety of different platforms. What are some of the things that you were looking for that would be kind of the pros cons list when you were trying to figure out what platform to select?
Sure. Well, we knew that none of us were experts in the virtual world, and GoToWebinar, Zoom, while those are used in a lot of everyday business organizations, it's not something that WCI was well versed in. So we knew that we wanted whatever platform we used or whatever we put on to be really professional, to have production value to it, and to be representative of attending WCI and live as much as it could be. So I don't know if you guys remember WCI TV. That is produced by CNTV. They're actually based in Orlando also. So we did look at several different platforms, but a lot of them required a lot of back-end user work on our end. And again, we knew that we weren't the experts, and we didn't want to become the experts in it. So we went to CNTV, and they actually produced our sessions. So we had live production. It had trailers, it had videos coming in. It was completely edited. We really didn't have to do anything on the day of. And they are partnered with different platforms. So they had a virtual lobby for us. And they customized it to look like WCI. It was very user-friendly, easy for people to go in. It monitored and tracked everything for us. And it did have a virtual networking exhibit hall capability. We didn't choose to utilize that at that time and I'd love to hear from people attending right now, your thoughts if you have done the virtual exhibit hall. We were getting so much feedback that people didn't enjoy the ones that they had done, because while you can have this amazing page in this digital networking hall, you still have to get people to come to you. And so they were spending money, and then they weren't driving the people they needed to talk to in. So we said, okay, we're going to focus our efforts on communicating in the chat, trying to engage and network in that way on this conference platform, and focusing on having pre-recorded sessions. We had all of the speakers on live to answer questions. So it was very interactive, but we didn't want to get into the possibility of messing things up. For example, in the Zoom networking event we did do yesterday for the virtual experience, I ended the Zoom right in the middle of it accidentally. So that's what we were trying to avoid. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that hurried up and got back on, but those kind of mistakes, just that wasn't our expertise. Ours is hosting an amazing in-person conference. So, but there are great platforms out there.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I was going to actually ask Mark to talk about a little more. Mark, you mentioned, I don't remember what conference you were talking about that you sponsored, and it had a great networking opportunity as a sponsor. I was going to ask you, like, what traction did you get from that, right? I mean, what was your return on that investment? Because to Julie's point, I think that's the issue that a lot of sponsors are running into is you spend this money, and if the organizers are spending this time and making sure the platform is conducive for networking, I do feel like there's an ask from attendees, from organizers, of like, if you want this to continue to be successful, if you want it to continue, the conference itself, you have to participate, because in person, you get that organic conversation, but through a virtual environment, it's easy just to be a passive attendee. You don't really have to engage. You don't have to do anything. And you're going to start seeing some smaller organizations, smaller conferences go away unless attendees start participating, which then brings sponsors back. So I was just curious as to if that was successful for you guys. And then also for Julie and Wendy, like, what is your ask to attendees for these virtual events? Like, they have to start participating a little more.
Yeah, well, the Tennessee conference is the one I was referencing that had the virtual town hall. We got some pretty good feedback. They had like this word that you had to select. So it's almost like oftentimes in conference halls, they have the cards that you're trying to fill out and do this. So they make sure that you go to, from booth to booth.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, oftentimes the people that are coming just to get their stamp really aren't interested in hearing about your products or services. They just stamp so they can be, ready for the lottery. And then, the tchotchkes or the free candy that comes with it. So, it was interesting. We certainly didn't get the same traction that we would have in person because, conferences typically there's breaks and they have, food in the exhibit hall space. So if you want to get your brownie, you got to go into the exhibit hall and you can, try to avert any kind of eye contact with vendors. But, the whole concept is to try to get in there and kind of do that. I found is interesting, Tom Glasson, who's, the consummate pro when it comes to conferences. He posted virtual exhibit halls were overall boring. Some were monitored and had someone to chat with and ask questions. Those that simply wanted to gather your email and push information to you were a waste of time. And I think that really is kind of a 101 for how you sponsor an exhibit anyway, right? I mean, if you've got value there and you've got a compelling message and you're willing to, be out there and engaged, then that's one thing. If you're there just to try to get business cards, that may or may not necessarily be what attendees are looking for. So I think there's a lot of challenges that remain because there were conferences that were already having issues with sponsors and exhibitors from a in-person standpoint because people were trying to calculate the return on investment. And being a sponsor exhibitor is not cheap. It's not inexpensive. It's the lifeblood of the conferences, but it's not inexpensive. And at some point, you got to look at, how much business did you get from this particular exhibit hall? Was it worth it for the booth cost and the booth itself and sending your people down there and buying the candy and the tchotchkes and, the shipping back and forth? I mean, for the National Work Comp Conference, it can be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 investment when you wrap in all the different things that are going on. WCI probably less expensive than that, but still, it's not inexpensive. So,
correct. No, for sure. I love how Melissa Dunn commented on the app that the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation used for their virtual conference. The name of the platform is escaping me, but I'll remember it and put it in the chat. But it was amazing. So it had a networking capability where you just clicked a button and you went into this networking room and you just waited for someone to pop up and you were matched with someone and you had no idea who you were going to get. So you had 90 seconds or you could extend it, but you had a chance to meet so many different people. And then in the attendee platform, you could click on send a private message or start a video message, or there are ways to engage and connect that some of the other platforms don't have. And obviously the person you're trying to talk to can say no, but typically, you're able to communicate a little bit easier and get an email address or start some kind of dialogue that you can follow up with later when you have platforms like that. So I think if there are virtual things that are here to stay, and I do believe that you'll still continue to see some of that, especially until everyone, until the vaccine is more widely spread and people are taking it and people, and that we feel safe to come back. But I think those kinds of engagements are what will help set apart virtual events from other ones.
There seems to be a general consensus in the chat that mailed packages filled with sponsor information seems to be that seems to be a best practice. Going back to the IAIABC, they had a sponsor that actually provided a Panera, I think it was either $10 or $15 gift card. And the whole concept was this is going to be kind of a lunch and learn. So go to Panera, go get your food, bring it in front of your desk, or maybe attend it at the Panera. Which I thought was kind of interesting. So there's definitely some creativity out there. Switching gears a little bit, Jeff Rush with California JPIA mentioned with the conference he's on talking about relevance and making sure that you've got relevant content. What is the difference between in-person and virtual from a content standpoint? Is there any? You mentioned Zoom fatigue, you mentioned conference fatigue. Everybody and his brother's got a podcast. Everybody and his brother does Zoom. I mean, even my 87-year-old mother-in-law is doing Zoom. It's like, I know Jesus is about ready to come back when, she's doing that on Zoom. But, you got all that stuff going on. How do you differentiate yourself from all the potential different things that are pulling at people? I think literally I could attend an event, at least 2 or 3 events every day for the entire year. There's that much going on. So how do you differentiate? How do you make yourself relevant so you kind of pop?
Creative. You have to have topics that are really hard hitting and present day. I mean, for us, the COVID was, with Dr. Chance Home was right on. I mean, and what was going on in the hospitals right then and there. So that was really important. I mean, and social workers attended, administrators from nursing homes, the case managers, nurses. I mean, that was really relevant. Your topic, Mark, on marijuana. I mean, that is right now top also in Oklahoma and the law. So going forward, I mean, and we have to have creative topics for our case managers. Our next one's on urogynecology. So it's a unique topic, but for women and case managers who have patients in that have issues, this is really a great topic. And we have people signing up for that. Now, it might be a small category of case managers that are dealing with it, but it's still an important subject. So it's trying to ask our membership what their opinion is, what they need information on, and we get some response. Again, our members don't always answer our surveys, and they don't send you information when you ask. So the conference gave us a list, because we asked them at the end of the conference, what are topics that were relevant to you? And we'd get 25 to 30 different ones, and that's what we pulled from. So we didn't have that this year. So we've asked SurveyMonkey, just an email blast. And what are our exhibitor or vendor members, our valued business members on our board, what topics can they bring to? What is their information and what can they offer? And hopefully save us money to do it. So that helps a lot. So when they have doctors on their staff that, can give a talk, that helps us and helps our membership. But you got to have some really unique topics.
I think just as important, kind of focusing on moving ahead and what we're planning in December. In addition to the topics and the speakers, you have to create really memorable and expansive networking opportunities. So WCI, we have a program committee, and that encompasses all stakeholders from all over the industry, from claims handlers to TPA and carrier executives to service providers. And they meet several times in order to kind of bring, okay, what are the hot topics? What do we need to be talking about? Who would be good speakers? Who are the experts? And that's really how we develop our program for the following years. As Mark mentioned earlier, there's always a band, there's always a concert experience. And then the big one too is our giving back component, which is a huge part of the mission of WCI. And I think it's something that's gained momentum and sets us apart from other conferences, especially on a national level, where we have this incredible service day and everyone comes on that Saturday, and you see teams, you see Gallagher Bassett, you see Sedgwick, CC Massai, service providers, everyone pulling together, employees and teams to go and do physical work at the actual village. Where they're painting, or they're pulling weeds, or they're working with kids, or they're playing on the carousel, or they're back at the Marriott and they're putting together arts and crafts projects for the kids at Give Kids the World Village to do later. So it's that sense of community, bringing everyone together. Everyone's leaving their executive title and who they work for at the door, and it's just coming together for another cause. And then they do a gala that evening to raise money for that event. And so that's fun because you're bidding on different items, and you're having fun with your peers, and you're able to network. And I think again, in those topics and in those speakers, in person is so important, or more interactive than the virtual, because
Welcome to virtual, right?
Sorry.
that's nobody cares about that anymore.
Nope.
No.
You are listening to that, but then you're walking out into the hallway and then you're having a conversation, a hallway conversation, like you were talking about. This is, we're on Zoom instead of in the conference hallway, but you're talking about what the speakers were just presenting to you. And there's just more organic conversation, where in this virtual world, people are multitasking, they're on the phone, they're in their email, they might be, Amazon shopping, and then halfway listening, and then it's kind of forgotten when you get off. So that's my 2 cents. That took too long to say.
No, it was great. Speaking of going forward, one thing that we talked about in our pre-meeting to this is we want to ask the audience to put in chat some conferences that you've heard of that maybe either have committed to being virtual, or they're going to be a hybrid model, or they're still going to be in person. We've noticed when we were doing a little bit of research, there's kind of scattered information out there for a lot of the national conferences on, what approach they're going to have. So if you have any inside scoop, put it in the chat so we all can benefit from that. And then Mark, I know you'll include that in some of the follow-up too. So maybe it'll be a centralized spot for people to see going forward what 2021 is looking like as far as the big conferences go. So
yeah. Well, one final question as we kind of wrap this up. How do you monetize a virtual environment? Because a lot of the conferences or events have ended up being free to attend. And I, if you're providing CE credits, there's obviously somebody that's footing the bill for that. But how do you monetize it? Because both WCI and CMSA Oklahoma are nonprofits, but that doesn't mean that you don't pay the bills. So what happened in 2020? What's happening in 2021? Wendy, with your ongoing kind of events, how are you monetizing this virtual event?
We did all free last year, and this year we just started with all membership. To be a member, they can attend free all the luncheons. We've always done that. So to do the webinars, we just offer the same, free registration. Now for non-members, all we charge is $20, because it still costs to do the CE.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has to come from somewhere, and as a nonprofit, we just had more expenses than income this year. So and we're trying, and that means CMSA members nationwide can actually register for free. So it's not just the Oklahoma area. We have a sister chapter in Tulsa, so all their members can attend free too. And we've offered it, I've sent it out to chapter members, to our leader email list, so that it can be shared. I mean, I have a gentleman from Hawaii that's registered, and they're free. So as a CMSA member overall, that's a great opportunity. And hopefully they'll we share that and send that. But you have to start bringing in some income. So, it's $20 for a CE. I don't think that's too much to ask, and no sponsor right now. So yeah.
I think as long as everyone's doing everything for free, it's really difficult unless you're offering something exclusive and different, or a designation, or something that is that the attendee is seeing of a different value than what everyone else is providing. I know that WCI, we were able to offset a lot of our cost through sponsorships. We got a virtual sponsor to help offset the platform cost. We got a sponsor to defray the cost of the CE expense. So they got a lot of exposure and promotion from that perspective. And again, the sponsorships I mentioned from the re-airing of the WCI virtual that we did, but it's just the economic impact there's just in person is much greater, and it's very difficult to achieve that with a virtual experience. I will say that something that was really great that happened this year was the Give Kids the World silent auction. And so taking that experience virtual, while we missed the camaraderie of the in-person service and the gala, we were able to do a video that demonstrated how people could get involved by doing at-home volunteer projects. And so that was really cool and got people engaged. And then we promoted an online auction. So that decreased cost actually from what it costs to host and sponsor a large in-person gala, but we were able to raise a significant amount of money for the charity through that virtual experience. So I think that was something that was a huge benefit that came out of it.
It seems like the operative word is happen to be creative. Y'all were creative on the fly last year. You've got some experience now under your belt. For those that are attendees or sponsors in the audience, or those that are also organizers, Julie, do you have any last words of wisdom for what 2021 has in store?
Words of wisdom. I think flexibility and creativity are key. I think contingency planning is key. Everything is so up in the air. Obviously, we hope that by Wendy and I's conferences in November and December, we'll all be in a different place, and people who want to get the vaccine will have had it, and we'll have successful in-person conferences. But I just think that you just really have to be open to all the possibilities and be creative and exhaust all your efforts. To that, I'm going to put an article in the chat. The Orlando World Marriott actually did an in-person conference in October, and they've got a new kind of platform called Connect with Confidence. And so they're stating all the things that they are doing differently from a meeting planner and organizer's point of view that will entice people to want to come and feel safe to come to an in-person meeting. So for any of you who think that might be helpful, I'm going to place that in here too.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Julie.
Wendy, any words of wisdom from you on what
we just need to be patient and work together. I mean, teamwork is really important right now. Communication. I mean, that's the number one. So we're all in the same boat, just different, levels of it probably.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because Julie's is huge and mine's really tiny.
All both very important. All of it.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was one of the things I pulled from our prep, is that with such wide disparity on the scale of what y'all are overseeing, there were a lot of commonalities.
Absolutely.
Between the challenges that you were doing, maybe, on a bigger scale or smaller scale, but putting on an event is still putting on an event. There's still blocking and tackling, all the stuff that you got to do to make it successful.
Yeah. And
any final words of wisdom from you? Because I know you're on the Nebraska. You do something as a conference organizer. Hey, Wendy's dog.
Yeah, so I'm on the Work Comp Association of Nebraska. I'm a board member, and it is interesting as a vendor, a sponsor for a lot of conferences. I think early on last year, even just I would watch all the conferences that I attend every year, and then it was like, oh, it's going to be virtual, or oh, it's canceled, and there was like a sense of frustration and anger of like, I want to be out there and doing those things. But I hope everyone takes away from this, like there's a lot of planning and a lot of conversations going on in the background, with the goal of keeping everyone safe, as well as making sure that we're able to do this again in the future. And so early on, I had a lot of those frustrations, and then you realize like no one wants to cancel their conference. No one wants to be virtual. Someone mentioned Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing. People are tired of just being on a computer all the time. But that being said, I think everyone's coming up and thinking of creative ways to make it so it is a little bit more enjoyable. So I thank both of you for your insights. I think there was a lot of good conversation. Care package wise, I think we need to send one to Tom Glasson. I feel like he's our chat MVP. So.
Well, and I think Chris Garland's comment is really good. I think in 2021, people will be hungry to see each other in person. And I think that is true, not just for conference events, but just for family. So how do you do that safely? How do you transition? The conferences that are, have February dates are going to be they're going to have much tighter constraints than November for Wendy and December for Julie. So again, y'all have somewhat the benefit of, a little bit of time and distance which hopefully will help that. We really appreciate Julie and Wendy, y'all being here. Really appreciate all the chatter in the Zoom chat. Great comments as usual. I will publish a recap article that incorporates a lot of these comments. I think there were some best practices and some good questions there. For those of y'all that are interested, we are going to be transitioning to a different subject for our Between Two Coasts podcast for episode 5. That's going to be scheduled for February 11th. It's always the second Thursday of each month at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. Our guests are going to be Laurie Lammy, founder of Policy Strategies, previously with WCRI, and Leisha Thompson, who's a leadership coach and transition agent at LeishaThompson.com. And our theme is going to be starting anew. So if you think about Laurie, she had to move from a long tenured position at WCRI to start her own thing. And Leisha kind of did the same thing after having been a risk manager at an employer for a long period of time. So we hope that you will save the date on that and look for registration pages.
Yep, absolutely. And we will do as Mark mentioned, a recap, the video. And we do ask that you share this with your friends and your family and colleagues within the work comp space and even outside. We hope that there's a lot of value from these. We enjoy doing them. We want to, have as many people enjoying them as well. So with that, I think we'll wrap up.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Have a great week.
Thanks, you too. Y'all take
Thank
care.
you.
Take care.